Well, good evening and welcome to my State of Mind here on WPRI.com. In lieu of new original programs at 7:30 on MyRI TV and Fox Problems at midnight, we're offering commentary here on, what's happening over the course of the day and during this time that we are living in, which is something. There are former shows, though, at those time slots, and so check into some pretty cool interviews from not only yesterday, but even a few years ago. In the meantime, let's talk about something that we thought we had put to bed. Remember, we were discussing the challenges that the garden centers and farm stands had here in Rhode Island. Whereas in Massachusetts, they are labeled essential businesses and have been open from the get-go of this COVID-19 season that we are in. Not so much in Rhode Island. And after they weren't allowed to be open, then they were given some curbside availability, but that wasn't really fair either because the box stores here in Rhode Island were doing the hanging plants and the potted plants and all the other garden stuff that people were still shopping for legally. And the Massachusetts garden centers were eating the Rhode Island garden centers' lunches. And it wasn't good. And so we were pounding away here on this forum on my radio show, weekdays 3 to 6. Lieutenant Governor and his small business consortium that he's put together with his multiple conference calls where hundreds of businesses have been getting together over the course of a couple of weeks or a couple of times a week over the last month and a half. All this was all happening, and the association that has all the garden centers was petitioning the governor and DEM, and we were all really putting a lot of energy into this whole thing. And then finally, the governor 2.5 weeks ago said, all right, you're heard. I want to thank you for stepping up and seeing the inequity, and we're going to make garden centers open Monday, April 27th. And we all said, okay, all right then, problem solved. And I didn't think I'd be thinking about it much since. But guess what? We found out that the garden centers can be open as long as nobody goes in them. Greenhouses, where people like to pick their plant, Mother's Day coming up type of thing, nobody can go in them. So if you're going to shop for a plant in a greenhouse or some other product in a greenhouse, you have to go to the place and you have to hope that they have an outside register and will bring out the plants one by one or two by two to take a look at them and see if you like them. Now, my experience in buying these things, and I'm not that experienced, but I've done it a handful of times, is that you walk in and you find the one that suits you. It's kind of like a Christmas tree. Instead, this is a drag it out, no good. Drag it out, no good. And it's not working. These garden centers have a restriction that is not in place at the competitors, not in place across state lines. And I have to ask the Raimondo administration and the DEM, what did you think you solved by doing this? Now look, social distancing is fine. Wearing masks ought to be a requirement for customers and employees as well. Making sure the registers are clean and tidy, sanitization, blah, blah, blah. And even if you don't want people touching the plants, and I don't think that's such a great idea anyway. I've never touched plants before I bought them. Maybe you do. I don't know. You can say that's no good either. You can keep a rotation in the garden center, walking around like the supermarkets are supposed to do. You can limit the number of people who can go in at a certain time. That seems reasonable as well. But the idea that you put this together and you more or less said nobody can go inside a greenhouse is just plain dumb. Dumb. And we're hoping that the Raimondo administration revisits this again. All they really had to ask was, does this work for you, garden centers? And the garden centers, who've been very conscientious about this conversation, could simply say, no, that's not accomplishing the objective. Notwithstanding, flattening the curve, the knock it off Raimondo mantra, the good work the Department of Health is doing, all the accolades that people are giving the governor for being present as a leader in this moment aside, because they're all true, there have been a handful of things the Raimondo administration is showing a lack of diligence and a real fatigue on. including but not limited to, yeah, the nursing homes and that ridiculous $20 per hour wage limit for hazard pay, which creates dissension and inequity. Massachusetts is doing $3 an hour for those employees on the front lines at nursing homes for everybody. Massachusetts lets you go into a greenhouse. Massachusetts is dealing with its own challenges, of course, and many of you are from Massachusetts watching this, regular fans of Dan York's State of Mind, WPRI, WPRO. I get that. But sometimes Rhode Island just needs to do the right thing, and that is to copy and paste what our neighbors are doing and not make it so complicated. In the meantime, let me just mention to you that yesterday, Governor Raimondo had an interview. Sorry that I'm peeking at my notes. Governor Raimondo had an interview with my old friend Jim Browdy, who does radio and television in Massachusetts. And Jim was talking about an article written a week or two ago by Tom Friedman, actually early in the month in April. Tom Friedman, the popular national columnist from the New York Times, who has suggested that if Joe Biden is going to be formidable in the presidential race, that he has to build some kind of unity team. And he mentioned that the vice presidential nominees, who I believe are all coming from the female gender, don't mind that. The phone is ringing. I'm going to keep going. It's just the nature of the home game here. It'll stop in a moment. But Joe Biden's pick is going to be a woman. And Friedman was suggesting that it be the Michigan governor, maybe the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, Donna Shalala, or the governor of Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo. Now, of course, Gina Raimondo has suggested that she's not interested in such a position, has said that she's busy for the next 3 years and doesn't want to play that game. Her answer last night was, I'm too busy right now to deal with that. I've got a mission here. That's very different. And it leads me to think that there is much conversation going on about Gina Raimondo moving on with Joe Biden, if not in that position. And I'm not sure the math works to make her formidable and helpful nationally. But there's no doubt that she is on the radar, if not for that kind of a gig, for a cabinet position of some kind. Which then makes me very concerned that we have a consolidation here of authority and power in Rhode Island since COVID-19 came. And it's ironic because Rhode Island has long been viewed as a weak governor state by statute and constitution. The way the General Assembly leadership has laid down to the governor, the way the governor has manipulated the journalistic community into a subordinate position, and the note that she has not had a single conversation with the lieutenant governor since COVID-19 began gives me grave concern, because if the governor is contemplating moving on, and that's her right, there is so much that's going to have to be done to clean up this mess after it has evened off, and we hope and think it will, in part to her good work, that she'll have to delegate that to the next constitutional officer up, who's lieutenant governor, who has been completely disconnected from this entire gubernatorial effort. So the Speaker of the House and the Senate President are now kind of bragging over the idea that they get to speak to the governor once per week. The lieutenant governor hasn't spoken to her at all. And we're supposed to sit here comfortable about continuity for the programs on COVID-19 and the overall 10 point whatever billion dollar budget we have that is now decimated by COVID-19. This governor better get to continuity, better get to broadening her team, better get to inclusion, better get to all of that in the middle of what she's dealing with. Because when the call comes, and all of a sudden she feels like she may be willing to answer it, we're going to be left holding the bag for the kind of continuity that Rhode Islanders deserve from their state government. And lastly, tough news today in media. Kevin McNamara was let go by the Providence Journal amidst this COVID-19 situation. 3 decades of excellence as a sports writer, covering the basketball beat, the football beat, and just a senior member of that staff. The newspaper business has been tough for a long time. It's exacerbated now by the COVID-19 crisis, no doubt. All media is challenged. All media is making some kind of a sacrifice at some kind of a point. I think this decision is probably short-sighted, triage-oriented, not considering the kind of brand he represents. He's a senior guy and probably making some, better economy than the not so senior people there. But it is also a product, most likely, of a projection that other than transactional news, what players here, what scholarship is going there, that kind of stuff, the games just aren't being played right now. And until and such those games are being played, the depth of sports reporting is obviously missing. Hate to hear this decision. He'll land on his feet. He's outstanding and talented. But it just goes to show you that it's a tough world out there right now for everybody. For everybody. Best to Kevin. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. No doubt about that. And you'll be fine. And we'll all be fine. One way or the other in God's plan, right? Wash your hands. Try not to touch your face. Remember to unplug your phone when you're recording a video for television. And have a great night. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.